All right, so welcome back, guys. We're here at the extension office. We have finally caught up with the infamous Andrew Ness. He's a busy man. The elusive Andrew Ness. He's a busy man, guys. He's the only CAA in what, 60-mile radius or something?
I don't know. No, not really. But...
Not really? Okay.
But no, just busy time of year.
Busy time of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, as if it's the same with the nurseries, guys. Super busy. I've tried to go check out some nurseries, even the sod farm, and rightfully because we're coming up on spring. So yeah. So we are here to discuss the proper PPE that the average homeowner should be utilizing in their day-to-day actions when they're applying herbicides. Are we dabbling at all with insecticides?
This is applicable to anything that's a pesticide.
Okay, pesticides is what I meant. Yeah. Pesticides and herbicides. And the reason why we're doing this is because I actually I spoke with Patrick from the sod farm about 3 weeks ago, and he told me that Andy had given an amazing presentation on some new information on PPE, the proper PEP levels, and that even he was unaware of. So that's why we're here with the pro, because we all know I'm not the pro, but I'm learning, and I want to make sure you guys learn along with me. So without further ado, Andy, let's take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. Yeah. I guess just to start off, just to preface this, I do pesticide training for farmers, and they're certified for their pesticide applications, their businesses. So they go through training every 3 years.
Okay.
And similarly with the nursery folks and the sod farmers, they're certified too. However, homeowners aren't.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, however, they're pesticides. Now there is a difference between pesticide classifications under the federal law. Some are general use, which are the ones that anybody can buy, and some are restricted use, which are the ones that you have to be certified to purchase, which is why farmers are certified and why LAWNCARE folks are certified, because I wouldn't say a lot of the products, but some of the real important products that they use are restricted use.
Right.
So that's why they need their certifications and such. But general PPE is something that everybody should be aware of, everybody should be doing.
Right.
When they're handling any type of pesticide, now whether that's an herbicide for weeds, whether it's an insecticide for grubs or insects, whether it's a fungicide, whatever it may be, PPE is going to be important.
Right.
Just because you can go and purchase it off of the Walmart shelf doesn't mean that you shouldn't take proper precautions.
Of course.
Now the products are safe when used properly.
Right.
Okay, so if you don't use the product properly, you're exposing yourself or the environment to unnecessary, levels of, whether it be chemicals or whatnot. So you don't want to do that.
Right.
Especially with the whole pollinator craze and everything too. So,
exactly.
So if you ever purchase a product for your lawn or garden or whatnot, if it's a pesticide, it's going to have a label on it. And that label, whether you're aware of it or not, is actually it's the law. It is, you're entering into a contract, and it's a binding contract by federal law.
Wow.
That you're saying, I'm going to use this pesticide as the label says. You're going to follow the directions. If you don't, technically you're breaking the law. So the very first thing, and I reiterate this to anybody I talk to, is you need to read the label. So the label is going to have a lot of really important information on it, and sometimes the labels you have to peel away and unfold them, so there might be multiple pages to them, but that label is going to tell you all kinds of stuff. It's going to tell you the site that you can apply it to. So if we're talking turf, it needs to be labeled to apply to turf.
Right.
All right, so you can't take a product that's labeled for let's say tomatoes and apply it to your turf,
right,
unless it's labeled for turf too. Right. Okay, so there's one piece to the puzzle there. It's also going to tell you what the ingredients are in the pesticide that are actually doing the pesticidal activity.
The active ingredient.
Yes, so the active ingredients, so that's really important to know.
Right.
That way you can compare products. Just because the brand name is different doesn't mean that the ingredients are actually different. So you can compare products that way by looking at active ingredients, which is really nice. The other thing it's going to tell you is going to be what the pest that it claims that it will control, and I put that in quote. Claim it, like, in order for a pesticide to be labeled in the United States, it doesn't actually have to work to control the pest. That's just a manufacturer's claim, believe it or not.
Wow.
The only thing the EPA really looks at when they're registering a product for use is not efficacy against a pest. They're actually looking for environmental and human health. That's the data they need to see in order to register a pesticide.
How about that?
So an interesting thing is just because it says it'll control something doesn't always mean that it will. A lot of the chemistry that we have in pesticides in general are really the same chemistries we've had for quite some time. So essentially, once we know that it does a certain thing in one pest, a new product that has that same active ingredient in it more than likely is going to also have a very similar effect.
Okay.
So
it's not necessarily them being malicious or anything. Right.
And I'm not saying that they're purposely putting stuff on labels that
just because they know they can.
Right.
Right.
Because eventually the consumers are going to figure it out.
That's
get
true.
Really mad.
Yeah.
So
and we're going to tell them all about it right here on YouTube.
Right. The reason I bring that up is because over time, things change in pest populations.
True.
Things become resistant. Their genetics change. That's why I mention it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you might run into situations probably not super common, but you could run across a situation where you have a pest that you're trying to manage that maybe it's now resistant to a certain chemistry that it used to be susceptible to.
Okay.
So that's just something to be aware of.
That's with anything, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And and it's you can figure out, do your research and your homework to figure out those types of things.
Right.
And, Extension is a resource for that as well. We do independent tests of products and stuff.
Okay.
Whether they work or don't work.
Cool. Right.
It's also on the pesticide label is going to tell you what you should do if you were accidentally exposed.
Right.
All right. So,
I usually almost ignore that. Like on anything else, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like if this eye drop solution, if this gets into your mouth, you should flush it out for 10 minutes and call no one does that.
Yeah. For pesticides, I do think that's really important. Read that before it gets in your eyes because you're going to have a heck of a hard time.
It's a pro tip, guys.
Trying to read, what to do when you accidentally get something in your eye. So
that's a good tip.
That's good to know. And some pesticides are interesting, especially if you accidentally ingest them. Some pesticides will require you or advise you to initiate vomiting to get it up, or some very blatantly say do not initiate vomiting because it can make it worse. So there is a difference, and you need to be aware of that if something were to happen. So again, read the label. There's also contact information on there for poison control and stuff.
Right.
And they would assist you and stuff, but the other really important part of the label is why we're here is going to be PPE. So personal protective equipment.
Yep.
Now, on a lot of our general use pesticides that are just sort of homeowner type stuff, this section could be actually pretty small, I guess, and pretty
usually
almost even non-existent.
And almost ambiguous.
Yes.
Yes.
The PPE should be on the label. Again, with some of these products, because they're formulated in such ways and they're safe enough that really sometimes some of them don't even have the statement on there. But that's not to say that you should be out there in shorts and flip-flops using it.
Right.
So my recommendation is the bare minimum you should be using is going to be closed-toed shoes, long pants, long sleeves, and a hat.
All right. And do those materials matter as far as what type of shoes you're choosing? Should we be cognizant of what type of pants we're using?
Yes.
And are those the same pants we want to later go to the basketball game?
Yeah. So very good point. So to protect yourself the most, what you would want to do is use things that are, for one, chemical resistant.
Okay.
All right. So what is chemical resistant? That would be like rubber boots, rather than your leather work boots. Leather is one of the worst things you could wear for pesticide applications because it's a sponge.
Right.
It absorbs stuff.
Right.
And then once it's in there, it's almost impossible to really clean it because who's washing their work boots?
Right.
Right.
And so a matter of time until it leaches.
Right.
All the way through.
You know, avoid leather if you can. Other thing is, you know, obviously we got to wear clothes. Okay. We're not going to wear. Most people aren't going to dress up in a Tyvek suit to apply products to the lawn. It's not necessary.
You'll scare the whole neighborhood.
Right. But you should probably have a designated pants and shirt that you're going to use for pesticide applications.
Right.
Use that, and then as soon as you're done, take that off, wash it in your... wash it alone by itself would be the best thing.
Right.
Don't throw it in there with your family's clothes, because then what you're going to do is then contaminate their clothes.
Right.
So washing separate and then running a separate empty load of laundry to flush your washer afterwards.
Right.
That would be the best thing to do. And yeah, don't go out to eat and stuff.
Right.
In the same clothes.
Yeah. Don't do an application of whatever and then go to a baseball game.
Yeah. It's just that. You know, it's common sense when you sit down and think about it like we are now, but it's easy to forget.
Easy.
So just try and, you know, have that little voice in the back of your head to realize that, okay, I'm using a pesticide. You want to minimize your exposure to not only yourself, but also to your family.
Okay.
So, you know, be careful with what you do.
And pets.
Yeah, and pets as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I have pets.
Yep.
I got baby fur babies.
Yeah.
Right.
And the label is going to tell you about restrictions for your pets as well.
Yes. The good ones, anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it's always a good idea to wear gloves, I think.
What kind of gloves? So I was waiting for us to get to that. Mm-hmm. So I know that there's a big company, Black Diesel or Diesel gloves, that a lot of people like to use, which are really good. They're strong gloves. I think they're about 3 or 5 mil strength gloves. But is that adequate for herbicides? That's great when you're cleaning things and maybe mixing some stuff up. Yeah. But is that adequate when it comes to the application?
So the thickness of that glove is gonna have a large effect on its permeability.
Right.
So for most generally used home pesticides, a good nitrile glove like that is okay.
Okay.
However, if you are exposed and you do get some product on those gloves,
deteriorates.
It's gonna give you about 10-20 minutes of protection until it works its way through.
Right.
After that, you know, you can still use them, just get a new pair.
Right.
All right. Or another solution to the problem is get thicker gloves. Mm-hmm. In order for a nitrile glove to be really, truly chemical resistant to most chemicals, it needs to be at least 15 mils thick.
15 mils.
Yeah. And honestly, that's not that thick, you know, in the grand scheme of things.
No, it isn't.
You know, but
it's just a lot thicker than your common.
4.
Right. Right. It's a lot thicker than 4.
Yes. Yeah. And you can get those at garden supply centers. It'll say the thickness on it.
Cool.
And I'd say for 99% of pesticides that a homeowner would encounter, they're not going to penetrate that.
Right.
Regular, just rubber gloves that are not nitrile, just the regular rubber stuff. Latex, I'm sorry. Latex gloves. They're very absorbent.
Okay, so latex is bad.
Latex is not the greatest.
Not the greatest.
Especially because they're so thin.
We won't say bad. We'll say not the greatest.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And they're really thin generally too.
Right.
They don't offer a whole lot of protection.
Right.
Stuff can get through those pretty quickly.
Right.
Now you can, again, the label's gonna, if it requires a special glove, the label will say what type of glove you should use.
That's good.
And the thickness of the glove or and things like that.
Right.
Again, that's why it's important to read the label.
Right. So I think it's important to kind of highlight from me, something equivalent to the standard of like the Black Diesel I referenced. Of course, there's other really good nitrile gloves out there, but those gloves, and then to have a separate pair of maybe something to buy from a garden supply place, and they're not that expensive. I believe I saw some here at the mill for like $3 for that quality level. So it's not that expensive to invest in your own health and just have those 2 sets ready to go for your applications.
Yeah, and another thing about gloves too, don't use the standard rubber or leather cotton gloves, like your work gloves.
Right.
Again, they're going to absorb pesticides.
Yep, and they're going to sit right there. And how often are you washing them?
Yep, right, exactly.
Because I know when I'm washing them, I'm probably throwing them away. Right, not too long after that.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
And
if you're wearing a hat too, it's good to have protection. I would designate a special hat, just a cheap piece of crap or something.
Right.
You can then wash it, throw it in the laundry with the rest of the stuff that you're washing too.
Right. What about iPro?
So,
and mask.
Yeah. So again, if it's if the label calls for that, it'll specify what type of both mask and eye protection you should use. Goggles that cover if we remember back in chemistry class, guys, like the ones that the full, that seal around.
Yeah.
They're your best bet. Because just
so my cool eye shades aren't going to cut it.
Just those standard guys are probably going to protect you from most stuff, but there's still a chance, depending on, again, what you're doing. This is really only relevant for things that you're spraying if you were to, because they could aerosolize or the fine droplets could swing around and get you. But
I felt it before in the past.
And another thing with swirling, especially if you're spraying or maybe using dusts or things like that, another thing is the back of your neck is often left exposed. So a bandana, just tie it right there. That'll protect your neck from anything crazy.
It's a good idea.
And then for your masks, just a typical dust mask. I'm sure everybody's seen them. Filtering out contaminants in the air, like from a pesticide residue standpoint, those are completely useless.
Yeah.
So, again, the label will state, but the ones that are, they call them non-powered respirators, and they have a little filter in the center. They're NP something filters.
15s or something. 95, yeah. So I'll throw it on the screen, guys. Yeah. That one.
They're
be like right here or something.
Yeah, they're typically if a label calls for a mask, those are typically the ones that it calls for.
All right.
And I don't think that any homeowner would run into the situation where they need a actual respirator.
Right.
So that's a whole nother can of worms.
It's like, how did you get it?
Right. Right. Exactly.
But this is some good information.
Yeah. Just a final thought. Pesticides, they get a lot of bad rap. People think they're scary. You shouldn't be as scared of them, but you should respect them.
Right.
Use it as it's intended.
Of course.
And
not with flip-flops. Don't be...
Right. Yeah. It's nice to be out in your lawn in the summertime, but,
Right. Enjoy. Don't be negligent.
Be smart.
Yeah, just don't be negligent. Don't be negligent out there, guys. I get it sometimes, and especially when your experience level is high and you kind of feel like you can do it without all the extra added things, but you never know. And even if you get some on you, how easy would it be to spread to someone that you care about? Right. So just take those extra preventive precautions and protect yourself and your health. I think so. We're pretty much done with the PPE, but I'll give you a little bonus taste of. I got my soil results in, and although Andy is not the soil expertise, I figure we talk about it a little bit. When I get my other results in from Delaware, if Andy has the time, maybe we'll do this again. Maybe it might just be me emailing him my results and then him sending back some information, but. Based off what you've seen so far, and of course we're talking about my results from MySoil, guys, and pretty much it looks like I need a starter fert to correct some phosphorus deficient issues that I have going on. At my local ag store at the Mill of Bel Air, like I discussed, they have a triple phosphate that I'm gonna go pick up. It's pretty cheap, and that'll fit the bill there. And I already have the K and some other products that you guys have seen me pick up. But first impressions, what you're looking at, you've seen. The type of testing they're doing, although you can't speak to that because that's not your line of expertise. You have fished that out to some people that is their line of expertise.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Have. Right? Yeah. Does it look like I've been a good steward? Pretty decent steward?
So,
I do have a question about the pH as well. Should I mean, I dropped, I don't know what kind of lime because I was ignorant when I did it last year, but I dropped lime probably at about 10 to 20 pound rate per 1,000 square feet. And it looks like my pH is in a good place. But when I compared it to a test that I did last fall, and of course, when I did that test, it was before I actually threw down the overseed and everything, but my pH was a little higher. And I've noticed like a good 0.3 drop in my pH per that test. It's also possible I took those samples wrong as well. What would you
that was going to be my question, is how you sampled. It's easy to screw up a sample.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
But where your pH is now, I like it. And even if your pH was, closer to 7, I still like that. So
okay.
Your pH doesn't scream any problems to me.
Okay.
I like that. The next time you lime, there's parts of this report that I don't like.
Okay. That's okay.
So
That's okay to say. And
I do think when you get your results back from Delaware, it'll be interesting to compare them.
Yes, that's why I wanted to do it.
And there's also a couple of things that I would like to see in this report, like our base saturation ratios would be really great to see.
And where would that be very helpful for the homeowner to have those base saturation levels? Because it does recommend that we do get that full spectrum test to get that base saturation.
Your base saturation tells you it's your percentage of your cation exchange capacity is occupied by
talking CDC guys.
Yeah, occupied by hydrogen, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and sodium.
Okay.
And they always sum to 100%.
Okay.
All right. So ideally, you want to be in certain go zones for each one of those nutrients. You want your calcium to be your highest percentage of your cation exchange capacity, over 50%.
Is that specific
ideally
to
closer to 60.
our region, or is that
That's just sort of general crop rule type thing.
Okay.
Really for any fertility levels.
Great.
Or any crop. Your potassium, you'd like to be 3 to 5% or so. Okay. Base saturation. Magnesium, you'd like to have about 10 to 15% base saturation. Hydrogen, less than 10%. And that's tied directly to your pH. So if your pH gets very low, you're going to start occupying a lot of CEC with hydrogen.
Got
So
it.
I don't even have to look at your pH. If I see your base saturation, hydrogen over 15%, I already know your pH is really screwed up. So that's that piece. And then for sodium, some labs report sodium, some don't, but you can easily figure it out by just subtracting the sum from 100%.
Right.
But that is salt, so we don't want a lot of that. We want that, less than 1%. So that would be interesting to see. That way, the reason all that's important is because it's especially useful for when you're liming. Especially looking at calcium versus magnesium and those base saturations. So if one starts getting higher than the other, then that would help you figure out what type of lime you should lime with next time.
Okay.
So for example, if you were starting to get deficient in magnesium, so your magnesium base saturation is getting maybe below 10% or so.
Okay.
Next time I limed, I would lime with high mag lime.
Okay.
Rather than calcium.
Right.
That way I'd bring my magnesium base saturation up and bump down my calcium saturation a little bit and get those balances right.
Right.
So,
that makes sense.
all for this soil report, I don't know what your base saturations would be, but you're in the good zone with calcium, and you're, according to this at least, you're right on that fringe with magnesium.
Right.
So
Now I know
it would be interesting to see what those comparisons are like on a base saturation with Delaware's test.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to see what those results are. Yeah. The downside about sending the universities during this time of the year, it takes a little longer because they have other people to source out to, mostly farmers and and companies, right? Landscaping companies utilize those services as well. They're usually the pros are usually the ones who take advantage of these services. Am I correct in my assumption there?
Yeah, I mean they get very busy.
Probably some hardcore gardeners
Yep.
too, right?
They do.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only reason I questioned the report, to start with, was because their extraction method, which I don't know if it's valid for this region or not.
Right.
So that's an interesting point that we need to figure out.
Right. And I mean, it reads well.
Right.
I understand that they have
how
tried
it's laid
to.
out. It's really great.
Right. It's right.
For a
Yeah.
homeowner, this is
no, I
perfect.
meant even the science that they're
No, I know.
using for that. I mean, it makes sense. I just don't know
I don't
the
either.
validity of it because that's not my wheelhouse.
Right.
And I thought that you could help us out,
Yeah.
but you can because you're just going to reach out to a guy that you know,
Yeah,
and
we're gonna
and then
see
we'll
what-
revisit that guy when I come back. When I get to Delaware, we'll come back and we'll do a full unpack.
Yeah.
And we'll make it work. He's a busy man, but we will make it work because I'm busy too. But we will make it work, and we will definitely give you that full spiel through. But right now, it looks like I'm in the. It looks like I've been a pretty good steward. I can tell you right now, my micro has came way up.
Yeah.
Since the last test I did, and
makes
I've
sense.
been giving it quite a good dose of micronutrients. I've been using the microgreen 007 from Green County Fur Guys. So that's what's adjusted my micronutrients up quite well. And then I know that these soil samples were prepared properly because I actually know what I'm doing when it comes to soil sampling nowadays. So my cores were anywhere from 5 to 6 inches of depth. I made sure I took off you saw me. I took off the material on the top, broke that off, didn't need that. I got I think I got like 20 samples in my front yard and just like mixed it all together. And then I even let it dry a little bit because it was pretty, we had a lot of rain. So kind of had to let it dry out a little bit just so I wasn't sending them a muddy sample. And then you saw me take the sample from the front yard and I sent that to Delaware, and then I took that same sample and then boom, here we go. So even if I did it wrong, the results should still be the same sort of kind of.
We're still comparing apples to apples.
Right, we're still comparing apples to apples.
You're
but
basically comparing the test at this point.
yeah, we're just comparing the test, which is great, and I think it's important for you guys to know. So more to come on that. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you checking in. I will see you next time for your weekly dose of therapy with Rob. All right.
Sweet.
Yeah.